Kathleen. All right. So I think we'll get started. Welcome, everybody, to today's Women United Virtual Lunch and Learn series. I'm Rachel George. It's terrific to see so many smiling faces on this call. Some names and faces I recognize, and some are new. So thank you for joining us. This is the second event in Women United's LeadHers virtual event series. The LeadHers series is focused on ways that you can boost your health and wellness so that you can be your best self, both personally and professionally. As part of this, in order to lead others effectively, we need to first nurture ourselves. The topic of today's session is designing your life. And there are few things more empowering than that, right? So let's get started. If we could move on to the next slide. Thank you, Melissa. So today we're going to have me introducing Melissa, welcoming you all and telling you just a little bit about Women United. Then we'll have Melissa do the presentation on designing your life. And then Julia Monique Johnson will close up with some upcoming events for today. All right. Let me just introduce some leaders to you. So Julia Monique Johnson is our Women United Chair. And as I said, she'll be closing up today. Myself, I am the Vice Chair. And then Lauren Pereira, who is our Women United Manager, and she works for the United Way. And then a few other folks who helped pull this series together include Jan Turner, and Erica Dean, who are our chair and vice chair of the engagement committee, and then myself and Sandy Perillo Simmons, who are also on the engagement committee. If I could take a moment to just share about one of the programs that we help support, which is the VITA program, because we are affiliated with the United Way and we are here to help the community. So the VITA program stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. And it's a program that helps Connecticut tax filers file their income taxes if they meet a certain income threshold. And filing your taxes can be overwhelming. So some metrics to show how effective this program is that there have been over 10,000 tax returns filed so far, to the tune of almost $30 million being returned. And the average refund is a little over $2,000. And that's a nice chunk of change that if it wasn't for this program, those families wouldn't get that money. And you can see by the slide that our own mayor, Luke Bronin, is one of the VITA volunteers. In this program, we've helped over 10,000 community members, and one in particular is Elizabeth. She's a benefactor, and she talked about how being nervous at first at filing her taxes, but she found that the VITA program was easy and the virtual program was easy. She got the right support and she got her refund in just 8 days. And she encourages everyone, especially seniors, to participate in this virtual service. It's free, and it doesn't matter if you don't have good computer knowledge. The volunteers help every step of the way. Now, there are some other opportunities that you can get involved in. For example, you could join our annual season of giving, where we help local children and families with things that they need this season. And there are 3 things that you could do to help. You could host a winter gear drive by collecting new winter clothing like gloves, hats, and coats, and drop them off at the United Way, which is on 30 Laurel Street in Hartford. Or you could donate to the United Way Seasons of Giving Fund, and they will purchase what is needed to help provide food, shelter, and emergency assistance for people in our area. Or you can order from the Amazon wish list, and those items that you order will be shipped directly to the United Way, and they can provide those items to families in need. So completed kits include activity kits, homeless outreach kits, winter outfit kits, and what you see on the wish list will help provide those items. Another opportunity to get involved is the United Way Mission United, which helps local veterans, and it is Veterans Day, so that's very appropriate. helps local veterans, active duty members, and their families by providing services that they deserve. And you may want to consider purchasing a kit for veterans that would include things like socks, toiletries, downtime activities, and snacks. And lastly, another opportunity to get involved is to learn about ALICE. That's a program for asset limited, income constrained, but employed families through the Food for Thought Challenge, which will invite you on a 3-part journey to gain an understanding of what families in our region are struggling with and how they manage in relationship to food and financial insecurity. If you haven't heard about any of these, you may have heard of these through the Words for Women United bi-monthly newsletter that was sent out just yesterday. And you can get to these links. They're hot links. They're also in the presentation, and we'll share the presentation so that you can go to these sites. But you can also find these links in the United Way, on the United Way website. So thank you for hearing about that. Let's move on to our presentation, and let me give you a little background on our speaker. So imagine if you could craft your life, a life of fulfillment and joy that always holds the possibility of surprise. What might you be doing, and how might your life be different than today? We're so fortunate to have with us Melissa O'Hara. Melissa is a seasoned business professional who is passionate about motivating and inspiring others. After over 2 decades in corporate and business roles, she launched O'Hara Solutions Group, which helps companies, teams, and individuals solve complex problems and take bold actions. In this thought-provoking and interactive session, she will introduce us to the Horizon Life Design Framework, which takes a holistic approach to create alignment and clarity in your life. And you'll walk away with practical tools and takeaways that you can apply to your own life. Melissa will be our guide today as we delve into this important topic. I should have also mentioned that we're recording this right now so that it can be used for future reference. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. So we talked about LeadHers, right? And thinking about taking care of yourself. And we've been talking since this summer with the Women's United group about this topic of living purposefully. And I think there's no more important time than right now for a lot of us to be taking a step back and reflecting on what that means. 2020, we've heard it how many times? It's unprecedented times in so many ways. And it's caused many people to take a pause, to think about what they're doing or how they're doing it. And for some things in that reflection, they're going pretty well. And for other things, they might need to be different. And what I find in the people that I've been working with, a couple of things come up. They ask me questions like, Melissa, I'm not sure what I'd really want to do to live purposefully. I don't know what that is. Or they might be like, well, I know exactly what my gifts and talents are, but I'm not sure how I might be doing something differently in the world around that. Well, I have good news for you. So the one piece is there's not just one single way for you to live your purpose. That would be very limiting if you could say, oh, well, I've got to find a way to be a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, whatever it is. There's many different ways where your purpose can be lived and lived fully. And the second thing, and what I'm here to talk about today, is there's a framework to help you in that journey. I think some people just be like, I want to do something different, but I don't know how to go about it. And that's what we're going to explore today, is a framework to help you know your gifts and help how they might play out. So before we jump in, because this is talking about design thinking, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I'm going to start with something that's called a stoke. Now, if I know many of you, you are either trying to eat lunch in the middle of things or take notes, or you've just run from a meeting to here, or for some of you homeschooling elementary school kids that you didn't expect. So there's all this stuff going on right now. So I'm going to do something right now. I'm going to ask you to take out a piece of paper. It could be as small as a Post-it. It could be an 8.5 by 11. So grab a piece of paper in front of you. All right. And what we're going to do is a stoke which is really just to get you out of your current thinking and to transition you into something different. And the Stoke is called a no-look portrait. And here's how it will work. I'd like you to look at me. If you're in gallery view, I'll be small in the corner, or if you're in speaker view, I might be a little bigger, but it doesn't matter. And I want you to only look at the picture of me, not at your paper. And I want you to draw a picture of me. Okay, so take your pen, do not look at the paper, only look at me, and I want you to draw a picture of me. So I'll give you about a minute. Get that paper out, get that pen out, look only at, I'll look right at the camera so you can get a nice picture of all the features that you want to be capturing in this picture. So just jot down some ideas, keep looking. Let's see what you've got. Okay, we'll give you another 30 seconds. Can't wait to see what this looks like. I know there's a lot of artists out there or wannabe artists. All right, so I'm going to call time. And just so you don't feel too bad about it, I'm going to show you, I did a self-portrait ahead of time. And this is my self-portrait. So this is my picture of me that I drew in the mirror ahead of time. And so what I'd like you to do, if those you are courageous enough to turn your camera on and hold your picture up in front of the camera of the picture of Melissa. Oh, someone got my earrings. Very nice. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got my hair going on there. Let's see. I got my V-neck. I see that in a couple spots. Very good. All right. And so whether you're sharing it in the video or whether you're not, it's important to just take a minute. You know, this exercise took a minute and a half. But when you're talking about a designer's mindset, which is really what we're going to try and embrace through this process, is you got to shake yourself out of your current thinking. And sometimes you're in a rut or you're in a routine, and something like this Stoke would just, it gets you out of your thinking. It opens up some creativity. It loosens you up. And it also proves there is no right or wrong in this process. And I think that's an important element of what we're talking about with this life design. So many people want to get it right. Like, what's the thing I should be doing? There's no right or wrong. So whatever you drew for me is completely appropriate. It's great. It's wonderful. It's awesome. I've collected these in meetings. I've had them on like a collage of Melissa pictures on the wall. So it's a lot of fun. But hopefully it's just kind of brought you back to this moment and made it a little bit playful, because I think that's an important element. So let's talk about Horizon Life Design. What is it? Well, it's based on design thinking principles. Design thinking is a very creative problem-solving technique. And this Horizon Life Design process is a way for you to design new possibilities and be able to test them out. It is certainly a creative problem-solving framework, and it's a collaborative way to create very unexpected solutions. And I think that's where I find people get stuck a little bit. Like, I know what I've been doing for the last 10 years. I don't know how to maybe think it new or different ways. And this is a way to collaborate and come up with new solutions. So if it's based on design thinking, let me just take a minute for those of you who are not familiar with the design thinking methodology. So design thinking is a collaborative, creative, problem-solving methodology, and it's used to generate innovative, human-centered solutions. And I'd say there's no more human challenge than, what do I want to do with my life, right? That's a very human, it's very personal. And so design thinking, when done in a business or organizational construct, can help teams better understand unmet needs. So in this situation, we're going to understand, what are your unmet needs in the world? But it could be customers, clients, students. It's done a lot for consumer products or services. One of the other great things about design thinking is it reduces risk with coming up with new ideas. So I know for a lot of people, they might be excited, maybe have a kernel of an idea of what they want to do going forward, but they're scared about what that might look like. I'll give you my own personal example. So Rachel had said that, you know, after a couple of decades in a corporate setting, I decided to go out on my own. Well, I'm not just a coach on this. I practice it myself. So for me to go from where I was, which was a great job with a great company, with colleagues that I absolutely adored, to leave that and start my own company was pretty risky, would you say? So by going through the design thinking process, I was able to break it down into really small pieces, to look at different options about what I might want to go and do forward, and then finally get to the point where, of course, I need to do this. It became so clear that this is what I needed to do. But by breaking it down into small pieces, I was able to manage that risk. So I felt comfortable, really comfortable in leaving a full-time gig and starting my own company. The other piece about design thinking is it generates solutions that can be revolutionary, not just incremental. So for a lot of people, it might be a little bit better, but for some folks, they're ready to do something bold, but they're not sure how to do that. And this iterative idea, coming up with small pieces, iterating and learning from it is a big element of it as well. So that's a little bit about the design thinking. Now let's move into the Horizon Life Design journey and what the framework looks like. So we'll start with reflect. The activities under the reflect piece of the journey are for you to explore who are you and what's really important to you. Now, for some people, they've done work on this, they're very self reflective, and they might have an idea around it. But what I find for most people, they haven't taken and put pen to paper, and they haven't articulated it in a very clear way. And so spending time on the first part to explore who are you and what's important is an element that allows you to start to say, what's my true north? What are the non-negotiables or kind of those guardrails in my life? And then it allows you to start to move forward. The second part of the journey is about identifying. It's understanding what's your own personal point of view and how to improve your experience. And one of the things I do with individuals on this step is have them maybe think a little bit differently about what's constraining them. So when I say identify, it's your point of view. I find for many people and a lot of women, what they're doing was in service or to please someone else, not necessarily listening to their own local calling and what they needed to do. And so during the identify step, we wrestle around that a little bit. We have an opportunity to really declare what that point of view is, how they want to live their life. And think of it almost as if you were watching HGTV or any of those shows. You're creating your design criteria. What are the must haves for you as you come up with options to move forward? In the imagine step, that's really where you start to get innovative. You come up based off of the clues you've gathered so far to generate ideas on how to create a dream future. What would that look like for you? How are you really living your purpose? And so the good news about that is you're imagining lots of different options. And I'll explore this a little bit more with you in just a few minutes. The next one is around exploration. It can be called an experiment, a test, or a prototype. But basically, what you're doing is breaking things into small pieces to refine your path. As I mentioned for myself, right? I didn't know anything about starting my own company. So, how did I do that? I talked to some people. A friend of mine was an attorney about setting up an LLC. And I'll tell you, there was no better day than when I came up with the company name and I ordered business cards. I hadn't actually started the company yet, but there was something around that experiment of holding a tactile thing, a business card that said it was real, that brought it to life for me. And so in the exploration phase, what people are doing is creating lots of ways to see what works and what doesn't work and getting clarity on their path moving forward. The last element here is about choosing, where you're doing two things. You're making choices about how you move forward, and you're outlining the support that you need to continue the journey. The journey doesn't end. And what I love about this framework is that you can use it over and over again, season after season that you have in your life. And it really is flexible to meet you exactly where you are. Now, choices aren't done just at the end. And while this looks a little bit linear, it's a little bit more organic than that. It's a little messier. But the good news is it's a framework, it's a structure, and it helps create clarity so you feel very comfortable about the choices that you're you're going to be following through on. Now, I could spend all day because, as you can probably tell, I love this topic and I'm excited about it. But what I want to do is just take 3 of these elements and we'll do a deeper dive on them today. At the end, we'll give you my contact information and I'm open to any questions that you might have. And we'll certainly leave time for Q&A at the end as well. So design thinking mindsets. If you want to be a good designer, if you want to use design thinking as an approach, here are the mindsets that are necessary for you to be successful. The first one is curiosity. You need to be curious. And sometimes I find it's hard to be curious about yourself, but really to look at it with inquisitiveness. The second one is awareness. And that self-awareness is essential for you to be clear about, this is what I really want, not what I think other people expect me to do. The third one is bias to action. I love this one. It's not just jumping in, but it's being very focused and saying, I'm not going to just think about it between my temples. I'm going to get out and I'm going to try some things. And some things are going to work and some things aren't. But when I'm going to err, I'm going to be erring on the side of taking action. Reframing is another piece of design thinking. Coming up with maybe a different tilt, perspective, or view on some of the problems or challenges, or even solutions you might be looking at. A favorite of mine is radical collaboration. So this isn't a solo journey. You will be playing with different people along the way who are friends, colleagues, individuals that you can use to continue and get ideas from, because sometimes you can't get out of your own head. And the last one is courage. Sometimes it's not easy to make some of these choices, but it allows you to have the courage to make choices. So here's what we're going to do next. I'm going to ask you to bring the chat bar up if you don't have it already. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in a prompt here, is I'm going to ask you out of this list, what are the top 2 for you? So which ones would come easily of these mindsets? So in the chat, take a look at the list here. What 2 out of this list would you say these are really easy for you? So in the chat, if everyone wants to just pull the chat open. What are your top 2? Well, it looks like curiosity is top of the list for many people. Awareness is coming up quite often. Some people on that radical collaboration, some people on reframing, right? Okay. So I'm going to now put in the next one. Which of these 2 might be more challenging for you or more difficult for these mindsets for you to maybe live into? So again, in the chat, which 2 might be a little bit more difficult? Courage, reframing, a bias to action. So here's the great thing about the mindsets. One of them is radical collaboration that we've said about. And that's the great thing, because what some people's strengths you saw, maybe bias to action, are some people's non-strengths. And so one of the reasons why it's essential to kind of have this tribe to surround yourself on this journey and to help you through is by getting different people who think a little bit differently than you. And so for me, one of the things that I did was I actually had a peer coaching group that I worked with going through this process to help me think about things a little bit differently, to push things a little bit further. And so just know that the radical collaboration is definitely a practice that will help for those non-strengths that you have, bringing other people to the party that might have a strength in something you don't. So let's move on to a couple of elements that we're going to go a little bit deeper into. So the first one I want to talk about is reflect. We said that that's going to be the part where you explore who are you and what's really important to you. It's a key step in the design process. What's really funny, and not just when I do work on design thinking in corporate, but certainly when I do life design work, most people want to jump to what's the answer? They want to jump to what should I be doing? But you have to slow down a little to speed up. And this is an example of an exercise. So one of the exercises that we do is around values. There's a tool that I work with, and it's to identify what's important to people and why. So, really come up with a way that it's really clear and articulated. So let me tell you a story about, I was working with an attorney. She is in Dallas. And one of the values that she came up with and really crystallized through this process was around philanthropy. And she wanted to be able to give back. Now, she also got clarity about where her gifts and talents are, which is another part of the reflect step here. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see here's some of the benefits of how this reflect step can help you live purposefully. It lets you be really clear on your values to know when there's a good fit and when there's not. And I bet that for many of you, you've had those situations, right? You know where maybe it's feeling good, you're in the groove, you're in flow, and your values are very consistent with the organization you're working with. And I imagine for some of you, you've been in situations where there wasn't that alignment, where there was a conflict or tension. And so the more clear you are on your values, the better able you'll be to come up with an organization that you feel a fit with. It also helps you with aligning what you do, your job, and who you are, so that you can, we say, bring your whole self to work. The clearer you are on something like your values, the more it allows you to do that. And one of the things, just to let you know, is we'll be sending you the values exercise afterwards. So you'll get that as a tool, and you'll have an opportunity to do that exercise. So just to let you know, that'll be coming as after the session today. But it also allows you to determine what to say yes or no to. For myself, I know sometimes I have a hard time saying no to things that I think are worthwhile or beneficial. So let's go back to that attorney that I worked with in Dallas. And she was in a position where she was getting work, and this was right in the middle of social justice. She's a Black woman who felt very strongly about supporting this in her local community. And yet, after doing this work, she had two different examples of work that came to her. One was to sit down with individuals and have them speak about their stories related to social justice. The other one was representing people who may need representation if maybe they had gotten arrested during a protest or something like that. While both of them would meet her need of philanthropy, she was very clear about her values and her gifts that said, the storytelling one is where I should be spending my time. The other one was not necessarily her sweet spot. And so before, where she would have felt maybe guilty about saying no, or might have said yes to something, what this allowed her to do is focus her energy and talents on a place that she felt like she could make the biggest impact and be true to herself. It's the intersection of those points that allows you to say yes or no. And she could do that with such clarity that she said she felt free about saying yes or no, where before she would have felt held back. So that's just an example of the reflect step. What I'm going to do next is move on to the imagine step. So the imagine step here is where you would create three completely different views of your life moving forward. They're called horizon maps, so three different maps. And it really is interesting because this is where I said there's lots of possibilities for you. And it helps open up lots of different ideas. So the first map that you would create is your current existence, but if it could be designed deliberately by you, what would that look like? The second one is, let's say that your current life was cut off. Maybe you left your job, maybe you, whatever reason you decided that was off. What would map 2 look like? What other options could you pursue? What might be possibilities for you? The one that's a lot of fun is map 3. And map 3 is all about, I call it no holds bar. What would you be doing if money was no object and you knew no one would laugh at you for the choices you've made? That's really kind of an emboldened life and what it would look like. So if you look on the right-hand side, when you do this imagine step, it allows you to take a designer's approach to your future. You're deliberately creating those things that you want to have in your existence moving forward, and you're bringing them to life. it's so important to have multiple paths moving forward. As a matter of fact, I was working with one client and they felt great with current life and big bets, but they didn't want to do the middle one. And I encouraged them to. And it really teased out a lot of different things that they might not have seen by trying to come up with just the two paths. So there's a reason why it's three different paths. In this step, you're using divergent thinking techniques. So you want to come up with many ideas. You want to be playful and it's fun. And what I hear from people is they get excited, where before it feels overwhelming. I don't know what I should do, Melissa. Now they start to get some energy and excitement and enthusiasm about all the possibilities that are out there. And one of the things it's done for many of the people I work with, it's giving them permission to dream again. It's why you see that little kid, kind of that superhero at the bottom. Remember when it was a kid and you could do anything you wanted? Well, that's the mindset you're bringing to this imagine step. Imagine all the things that you could be doing. And then what you do is start to move forward from there. So let's move on to how you would move forward now that you've got those three maps. And let's move into this piece, which is around exploration. So the exploration part is when you've got the different options about what it would look like, how do you break it down into small pieces? So again, it's like the eye doctor, is it more like this or less like this? You try it before you buy it. And that's really what's happening in the exploration phase. There's three primary ways that you would experiment. Talk about it. So who has insights or perspective you can talk about this with? Watch it. So watching people do the things you want to learn more about, or do it, actually getting involved and trying it for yourself. I'll give you an example. Another woman I was working with, and she was interested in kind of doing more community-based work. She found and came across a job, and it was actually with Sandy Hook Promise. And so if and many of you have applied for jobs in the past, you know what an overwhelming process that can be. Updating your resume and submitting it online and going through the process and will I get an interview or not? There's a lot of energy that goes with that. So she wasn't sure, is Sandy Hook Promise for me or not? So one of the things that we said is, all right, well, how could you experiment? And what she decided to do was use the watch it example. And what she did was she brought up YouTube videos around Sandy Hook Promise. And in about less than 15 minutes time, it was clear to her that that organization wasn't going to be a good fit for her. She wanted to give back to the community. This particular topic wasn't one that she was passionate about. And it's really important you're being honest with yourself in that assessment phase. And so rather than going through hours of updates and worrying about interviews, in 15 minutes by watching some YouTube videos, it was very clear for her again to make a choice to say, I'm going to decide not to apply for that job. So as you think about on the right-hand side, you'll see how does it tie to living purposefully? Well, you get to connect with your curiosity and learning more and exploring more. You certainly get new perspectives by either watching or talking to people, seeing different options, and you get to hone your craft. In some ways, in the do it, you might even be giving things away. In fact, in my own personal journey, these were some of my experiments. I've actually been doing this life design coaching well before I decided to leave the company, helping giving it away to see if I really liked doing it. The answer is yes. So with that, we're going to move into another activity now where we're going to play around with the exploration phase. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask you, and we'll do this in chat again because there's quite a few of us on the call today. We're going to do an explore activity, and I want you to imagine that you have done your three maps. You have decided that you want to move from a corporate role to give back more in the community. You've made that choice, it's one of your options on your three maps, and now you want to explore it or break it down into small pieces a little bit more. So here's what we're going to do first. Imagine that you've made that kind of exploration and you want to say, who could I talk to about it? So in the chat, let's say you wanted to move from corporate, you want to focus on giving back in the community. Again, we're going to just break it into small pieces. Who could you talk to or what could you do for this step? So in the chat, just jot down a couple of things that you might do to talk with people who would have insights about moving from a corporate to a community role. Career coach, great. What other ideas do you have? Who could you talk to? Someone in a nonprofit? Yep, leaders with charitable, like Paula. Local nonprofits. People have done it. Friends in the community. Absolutely. So you can see what this does is it focuses your time and energy to help you learn a little bit more. Let's move on to the next one. If you wanted to watch people doing this, if you wanted to watch people giving back to the community, what might you do on that step? So what are some examples there? Again, in the chat, some volunteering. You wanted to watch people participate in volunteerism with a cause, attending events, go to Power of the Purse, right? In fact, that's an example of myself, right? I watched Power of the Purse being done ahead of time before I decided to get involved in Women's United and become an active member of the organization. YouTube videos, videos online, there's lots of great things. Research, organizations of interest, absolutely. And then the last one here is around doing it. So, and we've covered some of those in terms of volunteering. Any other ideas about how you could get involved and try and do some of this? So I'll put serve on a charitable board. Any other ideas that volunteer work? Absolutely. Yeah, tour a facility or a nonprofit. Kids PTO, there you go. Temp role or assignment? Absolutely. So you can see in really just less than 5 minutes, all the ideas that we've come up with. And that's why radical collaboration is so great. You can see just the power of the people on the call today contributing and maybe coming up with different ideas that you would have come up with yourself. So those were the three that we went into. I wanted to also connect. You didn't have to go to the first session that we had on the LeadHers series around wellness was around mindfulness. Whether you attended or not, there's this concept of Dharma. And I wanted to just talk about it a little bit before we wrap up today. So Dharma, and this is just a definition here, ancient yogis thought it was our sacred duty to stay true to our own path and call this path our Dharma. They insist it's kind of this unique vocation. It's using your gifts and talents. And so if you're, that could be overwhelming. Like, how do I find my Dharma? How do we find our purpose, which is really what we're talking about today? And there's 4 things I think that were helpful for me in my journey, and I wanted to share them with you today. So the first one is around knowing your gifts. What are the idiosyncratic uniqueness that makes you you? So in the reflect stage, one of the things that I often ask people to do is go out to the friends, family, people who know you best, and ask them to tell you what are your gifts. And for many people, that's uncomfortable, like it's a little bit, but I will tell you, when you see the same thing come back and the same words and the same talents, if you're not clear about your unique gifts, when you ask the people around you, they will absolutely tell you. The second one is to live your gifts full out. So imagine you were a craftsman, whether it was a woodworker or an artist. Those folks are always practicing and mastering their gifts. It's the same for finding your Dharma. How do you take your unique gifts and talents? And sometimes it's giving them away. How do you practice them to get better and better over time? The next one, and this one is actually a challenging one for me personally, it's let go of the outcome. So you want to focus on the moment, not the result. As an example, if let's say you were a singer or a musician, if you are thinking about the applause at the end, it takes you away from the performance in the moment. And so letting go of the outcome is an important element here, that it's not worried about that, but being in this moment and not focused on the result. And the fourth one here is turn it over to the divine. You can use your own value system here, whether it's God, the universe, a supreme being, whatever it might be. And this isn't like just, oh, well, let's turn it over and sit here and wait. I call this, it's where preparedness meets serendipity. I cannot tell you this is where I'm going to get choked up, my own journey, leaving what I did to come and do this work, all the work that I've done to do 1 through 3 here, and serendipity is showing up every day in ways that are magnificent and unexpected. And so when you do this type of work, you can feel like you really are using your gifts to make a difference in the lives of others. So with that, I'm going to move on to the reflection part. And before we do that, I'm going to open it up for questions and answer. So just unmute and let me know any questions that you have about the stuff we've covered.
Melissa, this is Rachel. I have a question, not necessarily for you, maybe for everyone on the phone. And you talk about it when you say, focus on the moment, not the outcome. But we hold ourselves back. We're cautious people, and so I'd love to understand what folks think are holding them back from doing this type of exercise and really finding their right path in life. And I'll just give the first two because they're the most obvious: fear of failure and money. But are there other things that that hold people back, either that you've seen or that other people want to offer, that prevent us from taking these steps to make us truly fulfilled and happy?
I'll start and then other folks jump in. What I find is a lot of the self-talk and whatever that might be. For one woman, it was how she thinks about money, right? She was very religious and she was thinking that to think about wanting to have money somehow was bad, and that was holding her back from actually making more money and being more philanthropic. So there are some people, it's what people expect them to be doing. And I was working with one woman, and she felt like she'd be disappointing others if she took a different path. But what do other folks think that might be holding you back? Anyone else want to add to that?
I know the fear of, this is Maxine LaValley, the fear of the unknown, not quite knowing what you're going to have to deal with, and if you're making a leap too soon, or it's all. I think it all just attributes completely back to fear in general.
Yeah, fear of the unknown is huge. Like, again, go for me. Like, I didn't start out with, I'm going to quit my full-time job that I love and start my own company. Like, that's not, but if I did start with that, a lot of fear comes up, right? Like, what are you, crazy? So that fear of the unknown is a big piece of it as well. Absolutely. What
Hi,
other
Melissa.
questions? Yeah.
This is Bella Danielson. So I think you touched on a point that for a lot of us who work in corporate America, where I almost feel like sometimes they overcompensate the lack of certain things that make us incredibly passionate over, by giving us a stable and oftentimes a good salary, right? That we rely on and we build our lives around. So we have mortgage payments, we have kids' schools, we have a bunch of stuff, you name it, you fill in the blanks. And even though many of us have so many passions, and like you said something, one of the things that you touched on is, if money wasn't a problem, what would you do, right? So I can sit with you and give you a list of amazing things that I would do, because I have personally a huge passion for service, serving others, serving the community. I'm an attorney, and I do a lot of pro bono work, and I say that the corporate world gives me stability, and the pro bono work feeds my soul. But did you manage yourself leaving a high-paying corporate position to start your own company?
Well, let me, and afterwards, Isabella, and you'll get my email address. I'm going to connect you with another woman who I did work with, who is a corporate attorney. And it's so funny. She's not on the call today, but she says, you can use my name. So she works at Travelers. Her name is Tina Newsom Lee. And I did work with her. And for her, it's around maybe map 1 for you. So map 1 is, if you could design your current existence to really be at its absolute best, what might you be doing differently? And so for her, it was finding the intersection of her passion around social issues, her desire to want to have a voice. She also happened to have a strong faith-based orientation. And how could she make all of those come together? One of the things that we started talking about was, and this is where preparedness meets serendipity. She talked about wanting to be able to do that, be a voice for travelers and do it with organizations. And wouldn't you know, it was like 2 months later, she got a call literally from the CEO of the company asking her to go within a local community and represent travelers doing stuff for underprivileged people. And it was like, it was one of those moments where she was able to get her energy and her passion up because she was almost feeling a little bit down, a little bit like a mouse on a wheel, like, okay, I'll do this for my money, but then what would I really want to do? And what this process allowed her to do was find the intersection while she stayed at her job. In fact, just recently she was promoted, which she didn't imagine either. And all of those things started with the exploration of this journey. So I think if you can think of the intersection point, and I'm happy to connect you with her, and I'm sure she'd be happy to share her story with you a little bit more.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
You got it. Any other questions? Well, I know there's probably a lot bubbling up for many of you. What I have next is just some reflection questions that you can take a look at. So if you think about what we talked about today, and again, we boiled a lot down into just 40 minutes, but maybe what are some small steps you might want to take to start designing your life? So as we talked about today, what are some small steps you could take to design your life? So in the chat, if you're comfortable posting it, what's maybe one thing you might do just from the spark of the conversation that we've had today? So you can type in the chat or right, ask people, what are my strengths and gifts? It's an amazing gift. It's humbling when you get that. Absolutely. Come up 3 maps, talk with people, learn from their journeys. Yeah. Who else is doing what I'm envisioning? Have conversations around that. And some things to reflect on as you leave today. How might you start to dream again? And what support might you need? If radical collaboration is an element of the design approach, who could you play with? Who are your co-collaborators? Who are your friends that you might want to, accompany you on this journey as you start to explore what those might be? I'll pause here and let you know that one of the things you'll hear about is the small intimate gatherings that we're having. We had it after the first LeadHers item that was in August, and it was around mindfulness. There were about a dozen women who came together in circle to go deeper into the topic and explore that. And we'll be doing the same thing around the life design process. So you'll be getting an email from the Women's United group. If you're interested in being part of one of those small cohorts, they'll be asking a sign up, and we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the reflection and some of the conversations around this at that time as well. With that, we've got just about 5 minutes left, and I do need to turn it back to Julia to wrap up some items for the speech today. But it was just a pleasure being with you. I'm gonna, in the chat, I'm gonna put my email address. I'd love to hear from you. So please let me know and reach out in any way, shape, or form. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Julia. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Melissa. As Melissa mentioned, we are scheduling a follow-up today's session in either December or January with a group of 10 or 12 women expounding on the living life with purpose. And we're offering encouragement for specific areas you may struggle against. Again, we did this last event, and members here were able to connect, collaborate, and come up with ideas to work on topics on mindfulness. We'll do the same thing for today's workshop, so be on the lookout for an invitation. Next slide, please. All right, so upcoming events. On December 19th around 5:30, please join us for our first town hall in our 4-part series focusing on access to childcare, a topic many parents, educators, and caretakers can relate to in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Moderating the panel is Melissa Stanley of the Boys and Girls Club in Stamford, and panelists will include Beth Bay, from the Office of Early Child Education, Emily Brine from Voices of Children, and Kimberly Martini Carvel from Connecticut's Children's Medical Center. And also, we are excited to announce Red, White, and Chocolate, which will be virtual. And our tentative date is February 25th from 6:30 to 8. So be on the lookout to register for this event. As a side note, I would like to say I'm very proud of the chairs and the committee that are putting together this event. They were able to pivot and push through during these tumultuous times. So kudos, ladies. With that said, next slide. I'd like to thank you for your time today. And I hope the remainder of your day includes living your best life. Thank you.
Thank you. And